This is the Ezra podcast. And we're talking about a heavyweight fight this weekend on a Sunday, pay-per-view. Andy Ruiz versus Luis Ortiz in a fight that you kind of have to feel would put the winner in position to fight Deontay Wilder, even though that's kind of weird because Luis Ortiz already lost twice to Deontay Wilder in vicious fashion. But I still kind of think that's a possibility if he wins this fight. I know if Andy Ruiz wins this fight, that's definitely the direction we're going in this fight, in this boxing, as far as setting up Andy Ruiz versus Wilder, who Wilder, of course, is coming back to fight Helenius later this year. And to me, it's a very interesting fight. It's we have to be honest with where the guys are in this fight. We have to be honest where we could build it up and get excited for it, but there are more context to the fight than just it just being a solid matchup. So let me pull this up. Ruiz versus Ortiz. Andy Ruiz last fight against Chris Arreola, I think a lot of people left with that thinking he looked very shaky in that fight. Wasn't his best performance. Thinking that he looked pretty damn good in that fight. After the shaky part of it, of course, after getting dropped, after getting hurt a few times, I think that he kind of figured something out. And at that time, he's trading with Reynoso, and that's when Reynoso's camp's at its strongest. The guys like Ryan Garcia, you have of course Canelo, Andy Ruiz, Oscar Valdez. It was a strong camp at that point. It looked like it was building something, a deep stable. From that point, though, you have a grand departure of all these fighters from the Canelo camp, from the Eddie Reynoso camp. The thing with Ruiz is I thought he kind of figured something out in that fight. I did kind of like the direction he was going in that camp, and whatever happened there. So it is what it is. But I did like what he figured out about himself in the Arreola fight, and I like the style that he was going, and his counter punching, and his speed, and the way he was working off the defense, and also his legs. I thought were looking the best that they've ever looked. As far as just like the movement and the way he was picking shots, I just thought in the middle of that fight going on, I just thought he looked very beautiful as a fighter. Now you go to Luis Ortiz, who off his last fight looked very shaky as well. Definitely didn't look like his legs could hold up to shots anymore. It took time to warm up, took time to find his rhythm, took time to find his distance, and once he did, I mean, then he got Charles Martin out of there. But up to that point, I mean, a jab was knocking him down. Every shot that kind of touched on top of his head kind of put him to made him hurt and made his legs look like noodles. Now, you could say there was a long layoff for Ortiz, right? You could say that's part of it, but he's also 43 years old. And some people don't even believe that he's 43, believe he's older than that. But he's 43 years old. And of course, age is going to show, and it looks like his legs are kind of going, right? But he was able to come back and say his legs are going, but he got dropped and still was able to get himself back in the fight, keep himself in there. And usually that would mean your legs are in shape. That's usually what people say, like, oh, his legs are in shape because he's able to recover after getting hurt. We had to recover a few times versus Charles Martin. But like Ruiz, he did recover. And he got sharper, and he started picking his spots, and he started feeling his timing, and he finally caught Charles Martin with a big straight left hand, and got him out of there. And once he was hurt, he was able to go for finish. He looked explosive, actually, when he went to finish. Very fast combinations. Good work to the body, good combinations to get the ref to stop the fight. So you go in there with like what people feel like is two shaky performances. I think Ortiz looked a lot more shaky than Andy Ruiz did. That's just the truth of it. I think actually Andy Ruiz just ran into motivated Chris Arreola, who Goosen came up with a pretty good game plan that it worked one part of it, but Andy Ruiz was able because he showed something. They wasn't just a one-dimensional fighter. He was able to kind of box. He said, I'm going to box now. I'm using my legs. I'm going to move back. And when he showed that, I just thought he looked damn good doing it. And I got kind of excited to see, like, well, what is this going to look like? The more they keep working this. Then he leaves, and now he's back with I'm actually not even sure what trainer he's with right now. I don't know if he's back with his old trainer or with a new training camp. But the thing is, I'm curious as if Andy Ruiz falls back to his old style, which was more just like come forward, use your explosiveness, use your speed. And I wonder if he doesn't keep the momentum riding off of his going backwards, boxing, picking the spots. When Andy Ruiz does come forward and he does open up, he does leave himself open, and he kind of gets predictable with the shots. And also when he comes forward, he has a habit of getting stuck in one range. He doesn't have the most skill As far as like closing range, he's not the best at doing that. Now he kind of just comes forward and trusts his speed at a certain point. It's kind of honestly, it's very kind of amateurish style. It's something that you probably had a lot of success coming up boxing through the amateur system, but never really developed like I'm gonna get it inside and this is what I'm gonna do with my legs to cover that range. This is my legs to find the right angle on the inside. He doesn't really have that. He's kind of gets to a close to a spot where he can explode with shots. Now, when he fought backwards, he was a lot more effective. His legs are a lot better and more athletic than what we've seen him do. And he could step back and respond very quickly because he's got very fast hands and a good pop to his punches. I believe. There's some people that question whether Ruiz has power. I think he has some good pop to his hands. But if he goes back to that forward pressure style, he becomes a little bit more one dimensional. Now he because he has the speed, because he has a combination of a little power, he's definitely a little more coordinated than most heavyweights. He's effective with it, but I just didn't think like in this fight, and the curious thing about this fight, because Ortiz showed what his legs are, and he kind of showed that, especially early, he could be susceptible to getting caught with a shot and not recovering too well. It might benefit Ortiz to go back to his old style in this fight and try to catch Ruiz to go back to his old style and try to catch Ortiz cold, right? Try to get in there and put it on him and see if you can catch him cold. And I feel that if Ruiz hurts Ortiz early, especially, I don't think he's going to allow him to recover like the way Martin did. So it might benefit him in this fight to do that, to just kind of blitz Ortiz. Don't let him get set. Don't let him get comfortable. Don't let him catch his rhythm. Don't let him, like an older car, start warming up. Because a lot of people think the older fighters are going to get worse as the fight goes on. A lot of times they actually get better. They warm up. They start catching the rhythm. They get into the fight. Maybe Ruiz's plan is like, don't let him do that, right? And if you saw a Charles Barnes fight, that's not a bad plan. Let me jump on him right away. Let me test out his legs, test out his chin to see if he can hold up. So for his fight, that might be the right decision. Now, for his career, see, that's a short-term battle right there. For his career, I think the defensively, letting guys come to you, counterpunching, using your legs, I think that's really what could make Ruiz like a legit top heavyweight consistently. So what might be successful here, probably not the best idea for success long-term in his career. That's the interesting part going into this fight. It's like, what was you going to see? And did he himself see the effectiveness of him going backwards? Now, if he goes backwards in this fight, though, and fights a little more defensive, that kind of gives Ortiz what he wants, right? Because Ortiz is going to be able to work his way into the game, and they're kind of picking shots. Ortiz is very comfortable doing that. He's been doing that his whole career, right? And the one thing Ortiz still has is that big straight left hand versus the orthodox Ruiz. Ruiz moving backwards and it's kind of like allowing Ortiz to pick his spots and everything like that. It benefits Ortiz in the fight. That's why it's interesting. Because the style that I think benefits Ruiz in the long run would be the boxing, but in this fight, it's probably coming forward and not allowing Ortiz to get settled in the fight. Now, if Ortiz can get settled in the fight, and maybe there was the long layoff last time, and he just was a little shaky because of that, I think you're in for a very interesting fight. I think it's more of a picking shots type fight. I don't think it's an all action fight. I think that maybe Ruiz starts off faster, but if Ortiz can survive that, I think you're gonna start getting a lot of feints, a lot of see who could get to their position one shot at a time, and it might turn into a very smart fight. I'm just curious if Ortiz can survive the early onslaught of this fight. I'm gonna say that Ruiz saw and his trainer saw what Ortiz did versus Martin and how he wasn't recovering, how his legs looked, and how he couldn't really do the defensive moves that he wanted to do and he's used to doing. His timing was just off. And that's because he's slowing down and he's not really, his brain doesn't catch up to what his body can actually do. He still thinks he could do stuff when he was younger. And I think you're going to see a aggressive Ruiz in this fight. I think he's going to come forward and look to test Ortiz early. And I think he's actually going to really be a problem for Ortiz early. And I think Ortiz is not going to be able to get out of the way of the speed and the power. And I know that maybe, okay, Ruiz doesn't get a lot of stoppages. I think in this fight that he's gonna be able to touch up Ortiz. I think he's gonna jump on him early. I think he drops him a few times, and I think I'm gonna say a stoppage in the second round of this fight. That's my bold claim, I guess. This fight, I think he jumps on him early. I don't think Ortiz is able to navigate it. I think it's just gonna be too much, and I just don't think his body really, like I said, his mind isn't catching up with his body. I think this is why it's really important when guys like trained at the shadow box and they don't just hit pads and they hit the pool noodles and stuff like that, because a lot of times you're not still catching up to what the speed of what you can do, right? You're still, the pads can almost lie to you if like the trainer's going faster with the pads or he's catching you at the right spot. It kind of feels like, oh, I can still do what I do, right? I don't know, I don't notice the slowing down. I don't notice my body being off balance, right? Because the guys actually, when you hit someone on the pads, right? It looks like when someone throws a punch and misses, and you see a guy fall over the ring, it's because there's nothing to hold up against, right? So he's not balanced. If he's not balanced, he's going to fall over the ring. When you hit pads, something's holding up against you. So you touch it, even if you're going to be off balance, the pad holds you there. Then you go the other hand, the pad holds you there, and the pad holds you there. But when you punch it in the air, there's nothing to hold you there, right? So you have to get the balance, and then you start figuring out your speed. And it's like, as you get older, I think these fighters need a shadow box more. I think they need and I'm talking about aggressive shadow boxing. Like if you were actually sparring, like that speed of shadow boxing to see what their body can do at this point, right? Because a lot of times these guys get in there and then they're like stunned that their body's not reacting the way they wanted to, and they didn't see this in training camp. They didn't see this when they sparred and stuff like that. Certain things that you kind of have to figure out and make sure your mind's adjusted to what you can do at this point. I wonder if Ortiz figured that out or if he's doing anything to do that, but we're going to see, because I think Ruiz is going to test him very early in this fight. That's my pick. Ruiz, second round stoppage in this fight. And then that's, if Wilder can get past Helenius, that's going to set up a big fight, massive fight versus him and Wilder, which I think is a very entertaining fight. But, I don't know if it's to me not the best matchup for Ruiz, as far as like fighting styles, right? And especially with Wilder's length, that's going to be tricky for him. But like I said, if Ruiz can box in this fight, show something else, some other elements to his game that I thought he was showing in the last fight, it gets really interesting. In the co-main, we have Isaac Pitbull Cruz versus Eduardo Ramirez. And this is really just a matchup. I truly don't understand how they came to this matchup. I truly don't understand what the thought process was this matchup and who even brought it up and who was like, yeah, let's make that happen. Now, Ramirez is on a heck of a run. He's a talented fighter. Don't get me wrong. He's a very good fighter. That's, I guess, what my problem is on this fight is that Ramirez is on a heck of a run. He was at 126, then just moved up to 130. Just so, like, most of his career's at 126. Then he goes to 130. He's kind of looks small at 130, but he wins this fight. And now you're just going to pull him up to 135 for, I don't know what reason. I don't know why he wouldn't stay at 130 and, work his way there, because it's not like they don't have fighters there. There are fighters there. There's Hector Garcia. There's Chris Colbert. Gary Russell might be moving there. Like, there are interesting fights for him at 130 pounds. But some reason they pulled him up to 135 to fight Pitbull. And this is, it's just the size and the power. I think it's just going to play a big factor in this fight. Now, like I said, you're going to see some skill from Eduardo Ramirez because he's a skilled fighter. He's a talented fighter. He's going to have a southpaw stance, and he's going to, his lead right hand, his jab and the right hook off of that is very effective. Now, he's a guy that kind of, his power does play a big factor for him. Also, he's not afraid to get into exchanges, and really in this fight, he can't get in any exchanges. It's going to have to be a tightrope act for him. It's not really a style that he fights with often, because although he can box and although he is crafty and talented and skilled, he's a guy that likes to stay in range. He's a guy that likes to trade, and it's going to be hard to beat the habit and, mentally there the whole fight to get past these habits of exchanging and staying there just a little longer because you want to land your power shots. He can't stay in there with Cruz. He can't. Now, Cruz, who's a come forward style, very exciting style. I mean, you know him because he just fought Tank not so long ago, and then he just knocked out Gamboa out cold. A lot of people compare him to Tyson. He has a real compact style. He's going to come forward, and he's going to be the bigger man in this fight, so he's going to want to come forward in this fight. Now, I think Eduardo Ramirez, who is smaller and is going to want to keep distance and not really exchange, but he could hold his ground, right? Let Cruz jump in and wrap him up. The one thing about Cruz is that he gets wrapped up very, very easily, actually. He's not very effective in the wrap. He's not very effective in the clinch. He doesn't really have a good offense. He kind of just allows it. So if Eduardo can hold his ground, make Pitbull pay, make him get greedy, and then clinch him a lot, you could see a lot of tricks, right? It's going to take a lot of tricks from Eduardo. It's going to take a lot of choosing a time, biding his time, wrapping him up, scoring when you can, moving when you can. It's going to take all these things, all these tricks is back to be competitive in this fight and hope and try to pull this out right in his career. But what I think is going to happen is Cruz is going to maybe lose a few rounds, right? Lose first few rounds just skill wise, but I think he's going to start exploding. And when he starts exploding, and Ramirez has to break these habits, and maybe he does it early, but as the fight goes on, it's going to be harder and harder to stay consistent with, oh, I'm going to stay out of range. I'm going to hold. I'm not going to exchange. And I think he will start exchanging. I think when he starts exchanging, he's going to get caught. And I think that there's that point where Ramirez gets a little unbalanced with his movement, especially coming backwards. And I think Pitbull is going to allow his forward momentum to take effect. I think that an uppercut from Pitbull is going to be probably the crucial blow in this fight because Ramirez is he's hittable with the uppercut, especially when you got him going backwards, or especially when he stays into exchange. He kind of dips and puts his head kind of down. I think Pitbull's offense, size, and everything will be too much in this fight. I think they could be interesting early. I think maybe some fun exchanges early. I think that you'll see some skill from Ramirez. You'll see the ability I'm telling you about, the why he's been on the run that he is early, but it's just going to be too much, and Cruz is going to eventually get him out of there. I'm going to say around the 6th or 7th round, Pitbull lands an uppercut hook while pushing him back and exploding, and I don't think Ramirez is going to be able to recover from that. I think it's a very interesting choice to have Ramirez in this fight, and I'm not a big fan of it, especially just because of the run he's on. I just think this kind of honestly like a waste for the run he's on. But I'll take Cruz in this fight. I think this will set up a Tank number 2 fight versus Cruz. If not, later in the year or next year, I think that's the fight they're setting up here with this fight. On the opener, you got Rayo Valenzuela versus Giselle Corrales. No, so I'll make sure I'm pronouncing this correct. Yeah, Jezreel Corrales. And this is Ryle stepping up in competition, stepping up against contenders now. And if you haven't seen Ryle before, he's a very entertaining style. He hits extremely hard. He's a KO artist. I think it compares offense to a Naseem Ahmed. I heard another comparison for like a Manny Pacquiao-ish. And I mean, just to have those names, it should get you very excited to watch this guy fight, because that's exactly what it is. It's an offensive style. It's a guy who's committed to his power. He has good speed. And I think his punches are I think both arms are like 2 whips. They're comfortable with timing in all ranges, right? And he's very creative with his shots because he's very loose with his shots, very loose with his shoulders. Now, the one thing is he will stay in there and he will stay high. Like, he'll keep his chin up. He will put himself in some spots. He's taking some chances. And some of the chances he's taking are put in kind of like in 50-50 spots where both guys can land. And that's what's going to happen. Like, when you're putting an offense out there, that you are leaving openings. Every fighter is leaving an opening when he puts the offense out there. It just is. It's just not perfect. It reminds you like the Death Star. They have the one spot, right? There's a one spot opening that you can destroy the whole ship with. When you're doing offense, you're leaving that opening. Now, some guys' openings are bigger, some guys' openings are smaller, right? That they're just openings for the opponent to capitalize on. There's a point where Valenzuela really commits to his stuff, and he has his chin up to where the opening is a lot bigger than most other fighters. But because of what he's offering, and if he catches you, and his timing and his confidence and his how comfortable he is in range, how creative he is with the shots, and how he can adjust them, he's beating everyone to that spot. Now, Corrales is a guy that's going to look to kind of rough you up. He's more of a sprinter. He fights in sprints. He looks to explode in, get in on you. He puts his head. We got to watch our headbutts with him. He's a crafty fighter. He's experienced. He's tough. He's durable. I think that he's kind of, to me, picture perfect for Valenzuela. I think that Valenzuela's offense, Corrales is going to walk into a lot of it. But also, you're going to see if Valenzuela can't get him out of there, this is where it gets interesting, right? In a 10-round fight, and Corrales has got that rough and tumble style. How does Valenzuela react to it, right? How does he handle the pressure? How does he feel in a longer fight? Because Corrales maybe be able to go longer rounds with him. Now, like I said, the Corrales style, he kind of jumps in straight and kind of blitzes in and out, really with like a plan, or just kind of like hoping the off time you. I think that Valenzuela will catch him with some big shots. So it's going to just be up to Corrales' chin to kind of hold up in this fight. I'm going to take Valenzuela in this fight. I'm just curious. I think everybody's kind of curious to see, if you can't get him out right away, and some guys kind of durable, and it's a rough fight. How's he going to react? We're going to find out. But I think that Valenzuela might be the real deal. I think he might be a real interesting opponent for Tank coming sooner than later, especially if he gets Corrales out of there like right away. Then it's going to get real interesting. And remember, I said it reminds me of Prince Nassim, but you got to remember Prince Nassim is he had cat-like reflexes with his defense as well. And he was very flexible. He could get himself into weird spots and get out of weird spots with his upper body movement. That's the one thing Valenzuela doesn't have. Valenzuela does not have those defensive reflexes like that. He's not gifted like that. So he has the offense, he has the punches, but he's going to be in there. So that's the part where it gets interesting as well, especially like Corrales, who, I told you he kind of sprints in and he could just explode in and putting everything behind those shots. And a guy like Valenzuela, who, when he throws the offense, like I said, he fully commits and chin up, you can get caught in that fight. Like I said, picking Valenzuela, I'm picking by stoppage. I'll say around the 5th or 6th round of this fight. We also have Abner Mares making a comeback versus Miguel Flores. Some, people not really a big fan of this because Abner Mares has the eye injury, and they're a little worried about, what his vision is and what it could be after the fight. To me, it's Los Angeles. It's to me a good commission if they passed him to be in the fight. And I don't think the PBC, I wouldn't put him as like a promotion that puts their guy at risk. I think then he must be good to fight. And I think that Miguel Flores is the most dangerous opponent. And I think Abner Mares does represent LA boxing. And you know how I feel about that. But, if they say he's good to fight, then to me, he's good to fight. Another person to watch on this is Ruiz Alim versus Mike Plania. Alim could be a future opponent for Stephen Fulton. So that every time there's someone there that could possibly challenge Stephen Fulton, you should pay attention to it. Ruiz Alim, the interesting part about him is he's kind of like a sport karate style. He's very explosive, but his punches and stance and the way he shoots and comes forward, it's very sport karate style. So if you wanted to, look at sport karate and then see how Alim fights, it's very interesting. Thank you guys for listening. This has been the As Ra podcast.